Thank you all for coming to our September Flash Talk. We're really excited to start these up again for the academic year. And this fall season, the theme is our faculty and their field seasons. So I want to welcome Natalie Abell in our classics department. Her presentation is entitled Forging Connections Metallurgy on the Island of Kea. And I just want to welcome her today as our presenter. And as always, if you wouldn't mind keeping yourself muted until the end when you can ask questions. Thank you so much.
I guess that's my cue. Hello. Hi, everybody. I'm delighted to be here today, and I'm very grateful to the Kelsey for supporting my work on Kea this past summer. So the project that I'm working on is about metal and metallurgical objects from prehistoric Kea, this island. Prehistoric, so 5th, 4th millennium BCE until about, let's call it mostly 1300 or so BCE, but there's a little bit of later stuff. And we're looking right here at this, where Kea is in the foreground. So we're standing on a mountain, the mountain where the capital town is, looking out over the Aegean toward Attica, the region where Athens is, and importantly, the region where Lavrion is. Lavrion is a major source of copper, copper, silver, and lead in the Bronze Age and later as well. Okay, so maybe I can go. There we go. So here we can see on a map, we're in the Aegean. This is Kea right here. I hope that you can see my little cursor. It's in the northwest of the Cyclades, these islands in the middle of the Aegean. And Kea is really interesting throughout the Bronze Age and even the period right before the Final Neolithic, because it has very long-term evidence for habitation. People live there on and off from about the 5th millennium through about 1300 or so BCE in northwest Kea. And also they're very well situated for participating in Aegean trade. And one of the reasons that people keep coming back and back and back to this northwest part of Kea seems to be their proximity to Lavrion over here in Attica. There are also metal resources over here in the Western Cyclades more broadly, which residents of Kea are also sort of exploiting. But there's this long-term connection with Attica. I've got two sites. There are two prehistoric sites in this part of the island. Kephala up here is the Final Neolithic 5th, 4th millennium site. And Ayia Irini down to the south on this big, lovely harbor is it's first inhabited right at the end of the Final Neolithic in the late 4th millennium, and then inhabited through much of the Bronze Age, on and off from the sort of mid 3rd millennium through the mid 2nd millennium. These two sites were both excavated by a guy called Jack Caskey, who was a professor of the University of Cincinnati. He excavated these two sites in the 1960s and 70s, and you're seeing here just some archival excavation photos of these projects. He excavated specifically because he was interested in sort of the chronological sequence, identifying the different kinds of pottery that were present in the different levels and connecting them with emerging sort of culture historical sequences elsewhere in the Aegean. But one of the cool things that he ended up discovering was these two settlement sites with all the advantages I talked about before, right? That you have houses, households that are probably involved in different kinds of crafts, but especially in metallurgy over this very long period. So I started working on this assemblage of objects from Kea in 2014, which was unfortunately very long ago now. I began this project in collaboration with the woman on the screen, Mirto Yorgakapoulou, who is an archaeometallurgist who sort of brought a lot of analytical techniques to analyzing the sources of metals and metallurgical objects, but also as well as sort of evidence for technologies. How were people working with metals over time? And so we began to collaborate, which was great for me because Mirto was brilliant. So she was wonderful to work with. But we also had similar kinds of questions about the past. We didn't want to just know, hey, where did this lead come from? She wanted to know, okay, we both wanted to know how was metallurgy and the consumption of metal objects sort of connected with social change, cultural change over time. Myrto unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, but she was integral to the project, and so I bring her up in part to remember her. So what we found in these assemblages, we looked basically at anything that could plausibly be connected with metallurgy, and we looked at it every metal object. And so that means our assemblage as a whole is sort of wide ranging. So we have a lot of different kinds of finished objects, finished artifacts, like the ones you see here on the left. That's the bulk of our assemblage, as you can see. These numbers are a bit out of date. It's okay, you get the gist. But then we also have lots of evidence for metallurgy in the form of things like crucibles, tuyères, blowpipes for furnaces. Crucibles are for melting or for smelting raw metals. We have litharge, which is the pale green, which is a byproduct of working with silver. Slag, which is a byproduct in our situation, a byproduct of working with copper. And then we have some coins, which are obviously post-Bronze Age, so we noted them and then mostly have ignored them. And we have some possible minerals or ores that might be connected with metallurgy. There's one category of finished object that we've separated out here in this sort of pink, these clamps and mend holes. These are ancient lead clamps that were used to mend things that broke. And it was such a big part of the assemblage, both the lead clamps and the sort of perforations that you see in the objects where the lead clamps were meant to go, that we sort of decided to treat them a little bit separately because otherwise they just take over the category of other artifacts. And I raised that because we spent some time this summer working on the clamp and mend hole assemblage. So our big research questions with this project are broad. It's like, where did the raw materials come from? But also, who knew about metallurgy? Who knew the techniques? Was it only a few people? Was it lots of people? How are people working with metals connected to other kinds of craftspeople, since we have distributional evidence across these settlements of where the tools are, where the sort of detritus is? How did metallurgical techniques develop? How does the presence of metallurgy at the site relate or not to the distribution of finished metal objects? Does everybody have metal? Do only a few people have metal? Do certain kind of objects only appear in certain areas? And then because we have this diachronic sequence, thinking about, okay, how does any of that change through time? So these are really, really big questions, and I can't address, I think, any of them yet. I mean, I can sort of, but sort of season to season, we're building up our data set so that we can better address these issues. And so one of these are the sort of things that we were doing this summer. First, we were testing a new database that would help us get more people inputting data and also to regularize what we had. We were on what I hope to God was the last season of finding objects that we had not yet located somewhere in the assemblage so that they could be input into the database. We were working through the archival records to figure out the stratigraphy, the sort of dating and the architectural association of both metallurgical and metal objects. We did a lot of sort of trying to do final measurements, drawing and photographing of the objects. And then we had a little side quest where a couple of scholars from the UK came to perform a chemical and technical analysis on our limited sort of assemblage of gold objects. And you see here on the screen my intrepid team members, Lauren Alberti, Jamie Bexley-Craig, Rebecca Sanders, and Felicity Sorensen, who helped me immensely during the season to do all these things and to make really substantial progress on this project. I'm really grateful to them. Okay, so first things first. When Myrto and I started this project, we were working on our own, and we thought it was going to be small and self-contained, and it wouldn't take 11 years. But then the more we were pulling all the data together from the archival records and from the artifacts on K itself, we ended up with this massive unwieldy spreadsheet that we were sort of tied to but couldn't get out of. And so I was really, really grateful to Chris Motz at the Kelsey Museum for helping me to convert this horrible spreadsheet into a wonderful database that all of the team members were able to access. And really, I think has helped to streamline both data collection and I think also what will be eventually the data sort of analysis and output. And so thank you, Chris. Um, as part of the sort of using this new database, we went back and we were trying to basically make sure that we had full information about the relevant objects. That if we had noted them somewhere, that we had full descriptions, we had photographs, we had drawings, or we had noted that they needed those things or measurements. So here you see just some of the finalized images of, well, they're not fully final, but the more professional looking images of some of our metallurgical objects here. So including a bridge spouted crucible from the late Bronze Age, a terracotta mold, and this thing called a fire stand that is probably connected with metallurgy. It looks a little bit like a cooking tool as well, but we did use PXRF, portable X-ray fluorescence, and there are traces of metals in several of these, so it does suggest they have some connection with metallurgy. Um, in addition to sort of going back to objects that we already knew existed as part of the assemblage, we also were going through objects that didn't have any numbers, things like context pottery, big bags of pottery that are just from different, deposits in houses, etc. And looking through and making sure nothing had been missed. We also had to go through two classes of artifacts that I had just put off because it was going to be challenging. So there are these massive crates of pithoi, these big storage jars that we had never looked at, and that the original excavation team didn't consistently sort of note as having mentals or not. And so the team had to pull out all of these crates, unload them onto tables, and then check to see if any metallurgical objects had accidentally been left in there, which occasionally happened, and also whether or not some of these pithoi might have been mended in antiquity. And indeed, we did find several of those. So it was a really important but challenging part of the summer. The team members also had to lift down all these giant boxes full of conical cups, which are like they're like a drinking shape, like a solo cup. They're probably used for social drinking, and we have them in the hundreds. And I needed to just check and make sure that none of these had evidence for mending. They're really simple shapes, but it would have been really interesting. And so they looked through every single one that we have, but no mending. So that was also an interesting result. We did find mens. So we found a number of pithoi. So this is just to give you a sense of what a pithos looks like, this big storage jar. This is just a little fragment of one, but it has a lead clamp. This is a broken off lead clamp here at the top. So we found a number of pithoi. But then as we were going through these sort of other material that hadn't yet been examined with this problem in mind, has it been mended? We found unexpected things. So we found a few small finds, so non-pottery, that had mends, including two fragments of marble figurines from the early Bronze Age. So this is a typical Cycladic early Bronze Age folded arm figurine. This is just to give you an idea of what they look like. This is the legs, the pubic triangle, and the sort of belly of one of those. And you can just make out the arms here at the top. But this thing has a mental right here that went down through the leg and would have been presumably mended with a clamp in antiquity. There's another one that I haven't pictured here. We also found there's one part of the site, the temple, which was it doesn't look like a classical temple. It's like a shrine building that's founded around 1900 BCE and keeps being modified and used into the Hellenistic period. So I think it's about the 3rd century. And inside the temple, we found some evidence for mending of Bronze Age pottery. But then also there was this archaic cantharos, which also has mantles, and it's on display in the museum, so I can't get a good picture. But you can just see the light coming through one of these mantles here on the side. And I have documents that explain where the previous team had found other holes. So that was really interesting that the mending at the site, there's a lot of mending at this site, much more than exists at most other contemporary sites. I've never seen anything like it. And so it's interesting that it sort of continues into the historic era, at least a little bit. We also found a little bit of evidence for mending on a car that parked outside of our apotheke. And so I just enjoyed that people are still like, I don't have to throw this away. I better keep it. And so they had drilled holes to keep their bumper and their sort of wheel area on. It's just we humans, man. Anyway. And okay, so the last sort of big news aspect of our study this summer was that we had two visitors, Borja Ligara Herrero and Marcos Martinan Torres. Marcos from Cambridge and Borja from the University College London. And these two have been working on gold artifacts from Crete, thinking about technology through time and also thinking about the sources of gold through time, and whether there are changes between like the early Bronze Age, the third millennium, and sort of later eras, especially once you start having more influence from the mainland and possibly more mainlanders sort of on Crete. It's a controversial question. Anyway, they're trying to do this with the gold. And we had this small gold assemblage, so I invited them to come and look at it. And so they brought a PXRF, a portable X-ray fluorescence machine. Sure. So that's Marcos with that over there. And here you can see him zapping some of the artifacts. And then Borja does microscopic analysis with a handheld microscope, a Dynalite. And you can see it projecting here on his laptop. And I'm still waiting on the final sort of analysis from them, and then we'll work together on a publication. But so, for example, one of the cool things that they found, we've got this gold object from a Middle Bronze Age tomb. It's probably part of something that like attaches on an outfit, like it attaches near the neck and sort of hangs down the front. Um, it's called a diadem in the literature, but it doesn't really work as a diadem. So one of the things that they pointed out about this is that it's actually not. It looks huge, right? It looks very big, but it's actually not that much gold. So the gold that exists in the wire up here on the edge where it would have connected to the clothes is basically the same amount of gold as the whole rest of it because it's hammered so thin. And one of the other things that was really interesting to look at under the microscope was the ways in which it looks very fancy, right? It's got all these sort of raised little rivets and it's got all these cut out triangles. But under the microscope, and even here, you can sort of see the ways that the ancient person who was cutting out these triangles just missed sometimes. So like there's cut marks that overlap into the area where they're not meant to go. Here it's coming up too high. And this is very typical also of the kind of thing they see in terms of gold working practice on Crete in the early Bronze Age. And so we're looking forward to doing more sort of comparisons with what they're finding at other sites. And this, I'm just showing you some highlights of our gold objects. So that is one of the most sort of substantial gold objects from the Middle Bronze Age tombs. This is a gold and carnelian necklace, also from a Middle Bronze Age grave, a different one. And these different beads also, I think this kind of a bead has a connection with Crete and like the techniques used to make it, and these have connections with the mainland. And Kea exists in this lovely intersection between those two spheres of influence, so it makes total sense that we get both kind of beads. It was also nice that they were there because we were able to pull out objects that are usually on display in the museum and look at them more closely. And for us this summer, it was very nice because Jamie Baxley Craig, who has been studying the groundstone from the site, was able to look at, for example, this carnelian necklace and start to see how that does or does not relate to other aspects of her stone assemblage at the site. So those are the highlights. This work was made possible by lots and lots of people, including the Kelsey Museum and all of my colleagues in Greece and elsewhere, our team this year and teams in previous years. So thanks, everybody, and hopefully I'm not terribly over time.
Thank you so much, Natalie. I'm going to open it up to questions. So if anybody has any questions, feel free just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask any follow-up information that you're interested in. So, Natalie, what are the next steps in your research?
Yeah, so we didn't so I think please God, I think we found all the objects by now. And so like hopefully nothing else new pops out. So it's time to sort of go back and make sure we have full, sort of full information for everything that we found. And making sure that we have all the photographs and the measurements, etc. Um, uh, we have more work to do with stratigraphy. So because one of the things that we're interested in is change through time, it's really important to understand how the objects fit in space and time. And so we have to sort of work through the context pottery. There's more work to do working through context pottery and thinking about sort of the co-occurrence of metallurgical objects, metal objects, and sort of other kinds of craft tools or fancy elite things. Um, in all those different phases. So yeah, that's the sort of immediate big thing. Yeah, and then hopefully this gold analysis is going to go somewhere fun. There's more analytical work that needs to happen, more sort of metallographic analysis to look at the sort of microscopic evidence of technologies. But I'm not capable. That was Myrto's part of this project, and since she passed away, I haven't been able to continue with that aspect. So I'm now trying to find someone who can work with me, or someone or someones who can work with me on those parts of the project. Yeah.
Hmm, thank you.
Hi, so that actually was a good segue into my question because I was going to ask about what other characterization techniques that I guess Murtaugh would have been using if you guys had stuck mostly to the portable XRF or if you had used any sort of destructive characterization to see like microstructure to know if certain things were forged or cast or what sort of processing techniques could have been applied.
Yeah, yeah. So we this was both Myrto and Marcos did some PXRF, and there is actually more that could be done with that too, because there are a number of terracotta objects that I'm like, it's got burning, but it doesn't have obvious connections with metallurgy, but it's also like a weird something. And so I'm like, I would like to know whether or not these things are or are not connected with metallurgy, because we don't have things like um we don't have a lot of the actual like bellows, right? We only have the tuyères. Anyway, so I think there's more work that we could do even with non-invasive analysis. But then, yes, we did take samples. We did a number of round of samples of both the metal objects and then also of things like the crucibles to try to look at the microstructure, etc. Yeah, so the metallographic part I can't do. We have the polished slides, but I need somebody to actually look at them. And I have some preliminary notes from Mirto about it. And we did a little bit of we did also take a number of thin sections of the crucibles. Um, and for those, I have some background with petrography, and so for those, I've been able to sort of less on the metallurgical side, but more on the production of the crucibles themselves. It's clear that there are multiple ways of making them. Like sometimes they use organic temper, which is actually very typical, but then sometimes they don't. It just looks like normal pottery, like a normal pipos or whatever. And so we've sort of started down that route, but yeah, there's a lot more that we could do. So far, we do have a lot of the crucibles are probably not big enough to have been used for sort of primary smelting. A lot of them seem to be something more like sort of melting, like before making artifacts. But yeah, there's a lot more that we need to do.
Great. Any additional questions for Natalie?
I am really, just to
That's
say it
so
again, I'm
funny.
really grateful to the students for having dug their way through all of these pithoi and big heavy boxes of conical cups, especially for the conical cups, because then we didn't find anything. And I was like, but it is, the negative is good information. And they're like, sure, sure, sure.
Absolutely. I know those looked really heavy in the photo.
Yeah, it was definitely a multi-person job. But we don't have to look at this acknowledgement slide. We could look at something prettier.
Well, let's see. So Natalie has her email, as you all know, and most of you are just local and involved with the Kelsey here. So if any follow-up questions occur to you, feel free to email her. I just want to thank Natalie again so much. And I think we'll end our presentation here. If there are no other questions, thank you for being our September Flash Talk and kicking us off this fall season.
My
Um,
pleasure.
yes, thank you. And I hope to see you all back here in October.